Preservation, of course, and that's my favorite subject anyway. And as you see from the picture, I am my background is mostly natural sciences, and this project concerns prediction of the deterioration of the museum objects. And we made this with a team, and I am present here our most important results. Well, despite the warning of Niels Bohr, the Nobel laureate in physics and father of quantum physics, that's exactly what we want to do. In fact, we want to predict the future of the museum objects. And let's see how we can do that. Well, the task of museums is to preserve all these objects for as long as possible. And in order to better organize the preservation of museum objects, it would be necessary to know which objects decay rapidly and which are more durable. And this is the very classical problem of the prediction. As we all know, there are different damage processes which change the condition of the objects. In most cases, different processes work together, and different factors, for example, environmental conditions and structure and composition of materials, affected these damage processes. It's very difficult and in most cases impossible to take all these factors into account. At the same time, modeling of the damage processes are really important from the practical point of view. This makes possible to assess the number of the damaged objects, the extent of damages, estimation of the resources which we need for the preservation and conservation. So, how we can get in principle the information about the future aging of museum objects? In fact, there are three basic methods. First, if we know the rate of aging of the materials that makes up the object, we can predict the lifespan of the object. Well, this is in most cases more a theoretical possibility, because we not have such kind of information about the materials. Some damaging functions are known for some materials, but well, in some cases, for example, in the case of the photographic materials, it's a quite useful method, or in most cases, not yet. The second possibility is to use heuristics, which was compiled by experts to predict the aging of objects. And these rules are based on some research and practical experience. In most cases, we use this method. Well, we know that plastic objects damage more rapidly than, for example, stone objects. And third method is to use data from collection condition surveys. When we have reliable information about the condition of objects in two different time points, then we are able to model the aging process. For example, in this figure, we used the Markov chain method to to predicting the aging of the books. Well, to do this, it is necessary to study the condition of the collections according to the same methodology in different time points. Well, it's the best method at the moment, but there are some problems, as always. Many damage description systems are characterized by a high degree of subjectivity, and they are not very systematic. Some kind of unspecified terminology is used, and so on. How to overcome the mentioned problems? In this project, we use the machine learning models. Well, we have a lot of information in museum information systems, including information connected with the condition of the objects. And our idea was to link the information about the condition to other characteristics of the objects. And in this way, find the appropriate patterns of aging of objects, well, and predict the deterioration of museum objects. Our machine learning model uses the data from the Estonian Museum Information System. And this database contains a lot of information about objects, their contexts, as well as activities in museums with these objects. And there are also information about the condition of the objects. And the condition of objects are described as we see here. There are 4 values for the condition. The different values of condition are described, well, but these descriptions based mainly on usability of objects, which is not very good idea by itself. Of course, there are also a lot of information about actual damages of the objects, but this is a free text information and quite difficult to use. Almost 3.7 million condition assessments have been entered into MUIS. 25% of objects have several condition assessments. Well, that's important because we, as I tell you, we need at least pairs of consecutive conditions and assessments. Well, we have interested in the changes of the conditions. And there are more than 1.4 million such pairs among the museum objects with several condition assessments. Almost 32,000 of them, or little over 2%, have 2 different condition assessments. Thus, they indicate the change of the condition of the objects. And that was the data we could work on. Here you see the information about the objects. As data points, we used at least 2 condition assessments for each museum object, to which we added the characteristics of respective object and other features that help, hopefully, to predict the deterioration of the objects. And we experimented with different decision models. For the evaluation of the models, we used error or confusion matrix. And in the case of our model, the most important aspect is that the model detects as many deteriorating objects as possible, thus that there are as few false negatives as possible. A recall, which shows how much of all positives the model finds, is a good fit for estimating this. For example, in our model, a recall of 0.9 would mean that the model finds 90% of the deteriorating objects and 10% is not found. Thus, they are false negatives. And the second criterion next to the recall is usually precision, which shows how many of the positive predictions are actually positive. Well, we agreed that the precision should not be lower than 0.5, that Sally could give a false alarm in up of the half of the cases. And this figure provides an overview of the recall precision curves for all our experiments. In general, the larger the area under the curve, the better the model. And as we see here, the best result is given by the random forest algorithm, which detected at 50% precision 92% of the deteriorating objects. Well, in fact, the model found a needle in a haystack. We used this model on the test data from our 10 test museums. It can be seen that model gives relatively good results, for example, in the Museum of Coastal Folk, where it identified all of the deteriorated objects, or in Estonian History Museum, practically also detected all the deteriorated objects. In some museums, the results are not so good. It depends, we think that depends on the composition of the collections, which kind of objects are numerous and which kind of objects are lesser in concrete museum. At the same time, it's not such big problem. For example, if we take a look at the Pärnu Museum, there was 2 deteriorating objects, and the model found both of them. In addition, the model predicted the deterioration of more 9 objects, but well, it's 11 objects altogether, and it's not so big number that it's not make some kind of the problem. And this kind of evaluation we did was done on the test data, but we also tested the usefulness of this model in real life situation. Well, we created a web-based application where museum staff can see their museum's most higher risk score objects, and they were possibility to give the users check the objects and give the feedback whether the probability of deterioration of estimated museum object is quite reasonable or not. But of course, well, in fact, we are not able to estimate the real functioning of the model in this way, because museum specialists don't really know whether these objects will actually age much faster in the next 10 years or not. Well, in some objects it's obvious, but In most objects, not. Well, if we know this answer, there wouldn't be no need for such a model at all. Well, and this, of course, this is the screenshot of our web page where they give feedback, and here is the results of the feedback. Well, based on the test data, we expected many more yes answers, of course. But, well, anyway, we know that in real life it's quite hard to give feedback for this kind of prediction. Will the object will deteriorate during the next 10 years? To conclude, it was quite a very interesting project in scientific terms. I don't know if this has been done before. Well, we find that the overall quality of data in our museum information system is, well, satisfactory. It's possible to work with this data. Anyway, we already know that the condition assessments are, of course, subjective and may not always correspond to reality. Now we have received a clear confirmation of this, and data related to the condition of objects needs to be improved, of course, but we know that this is a well, long-term project. But, well, most important, as we do not have accurate data from condition studies, this kind of machine learning model is the, well, only way to obtain information about the aging rates of the objects. And, well, our project reminds me adventure in summer when I was looking for a bear. I saw his tracks, as in this picture, but not the bear himself. So I just had to imagine bear in his footsteps. Well, as I imagined the actual real rate of deterioration of objects in this our mathematical model. And that's all. Thank you for your time.
Right. Thank you, Kurmo. I was wondering a little bit about the scalability of this tool or the experiment that you are working on. Do we have better data for, let's say, some type of material, I don't know, wood or metal that was more reliable? Did you look into that? Can this tool be taken and used in a different museum, maybe in a different country, to improve the accuracy? Or is it just we need better experts, basically? Do we need more museum objects and better description to improve the model, or do we need a better expert opinion to evaluate the results of the model?
Well, thank you. The model is usable in different museums. The mathematical background is the same. Of course, it depends on the quality of the data. Well, as you know, the garbage in and garbage out. Well, it's possible to, of course, improve the data about the condition of the objects. And, well, when we have a really good description of the condition of objects in which done by the same methodology in different time, then, we didn't need such kind of models. Then we need a different kind of models. For example, the deterioration of different infrastructure objects is estimated in this way. That their conditions are estimated in different times and then used, for example, this Markov chain model or some other kind of models, and to find the deterioration rates of these objects. But in real life, the condition of objects is described in very different systems, and there are very big subjective part of this information in the systems. When we use this kind of machine learning model, we are able to find maybe a more right kind of information. But of course, there are better ways of doing.
I was wondering about the diagram you had, how the algorithm failed to recognize the sort of deteriorating materials in some museums. All of these museums are using the same system. They're describing their collections in Muis. So it's all coming out there, but the model worked better for some museums and worse or less well for some others. Is it based on the quality of description, on how the museum experts were evaluating the state of objects, or was it something to do with the type of objects that these museums were holding or evaluating?
Yeah, it's obviously connected with the type of the objects, but I think that the description quality of the condition of the objects is also depends on the objects. And this depends on the objects and depends on the people, which kind of specialists they have in this museum. For example, if they have one conservation specialist and he or she is a specialist in furniture, then we have a better description of furniture and, most not so good description of archaeological objects. But definitely it depends on the collections, which kind of collections there are in this museum. We didn't do expert analysis of this data, but it seems to me that it mostly depends on the collections. And of course, the quality of the data, but it's quite hard to give the description of the objects in the, a good way, without or a little subjectivity as it possible.
So a new vocabulary or even a metadata standard is looming here. If anyone is interested, you have a willing customer for a standardization exercise here. Do we have any questions from the audience? I have a projector in my eye, so I can't really see if anyone is raising a hand, but if not, then we say thank you to Kurmo and his team.
Thank you very much.